So the Gilgo Beach murders have been on everyone's minds over the last several weeks or months. If you have been a family member, it has been on your mind for years. But today, this evening, I just want to touch base and talk briefly about kind of what's happening on the case right now. If you're not familiar with it, I'm going to bring you up to speed a little bit so that you know kind of what is going on, what I'm talking about when I talk about Gilgo Beach murders, and who's involved, but also who are the victims. So the Gilgo Beach murders started happening years ago in New York, and it's the suspect, and I just want to say he's the alleged suspect. I have to mind my manners and the legal stuff and make sure I say he is the alleged perpetrator. He has not been convicted. He is innocent until proven guilty. And I'm going to say his name one time, Rex Heuermann. He is charged with 3 murders, suspected in another one, and suspected in um, more as well. So, starting back in 2010, where things really started kind of coming to light, a young woman by the name of Shannon Gilbert called 911, and she was this was back in 2010, May 1st, 2010. She called 911 because someone was chasing her, and she said these people are trying to kill me. And then the phone went dead. That began a search for her in the Gilgo Beach area in New York. And as the authorities were looking for her, they uncovered a body that they assumed was hers and realized it was not. As they uncovered that body, they began to uncover more bodies. And so they ultimately uncovered, I think it was like 11 bodies in that stretch of area. Now, there is some speculation that not all 11 are tied to this particular person, this particular serial killer, but there could be multiple people dumping bodies there, which is just crazy in its own. I mean, that's just, I've never been there. I can imagine why you're dumping all these bodies there and why it's just become basically a graveyard for serial killers. But anyway, when they were searching for Shannon Gilbert, they uncovered these other bodies. And the bodies that the people they have named as related to the um, Gilgo Beach murder to Rex Heuermann is Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. There are others that they are linking to him or think that he may be linked to, and there is one. So these were all um, generally within the time frame of 2007 was when Maureen disappeared, and then up through September 2010 was when Amber disappeared. So we're talking about a time frame of, as early as 2007, possibly earlier. He is being investigated for another person who disappeared prior to that. So that his crimes may have gone back further than just to 2007. So when Shannon went missing and they started finding the bodies, that was in 2010, and they found these bodies between December 2010 and April of 2011. And they found a total, let's see, they found 11 bodies during that period of time. Why has it taken this long because he was just arrested. That was 2011, April, when the last body was found. And he just got arrested last month in August of 2023. So why did it take so long? There's a lot of speculation as to why. There's the chief of police for that area was under investigation for corruption by the FBI. There was the battle back and forth over who had jurisdiction, and it has also come to light that this particular police chief, who was part of who was the police chief during the times that the bodies were found, actually frequented sex workers during that time. we'll we'll come back to that in a little bit. But that just kind of gets you up to date. So Rex Heuermann was arrested in August last month, August 2023, and he is now awaiting trial. So with and he's been charged with 3 murders, possibly a 4th one, that they can connect him to, and then, some other ones that they may be able to connect him to. So, here's a few things I wanna talk about. 1, he is awaiting trial. So, they are very early in this whole process of court and what will happen. And just to give you an idea of kind of what's happening on the defense side and what's going on, I've been a criminal defense attorney, and so I know when I had clients in jail, it was a constant, Miss Tanya, let's do what about this? What about that?" All he has is time on his hands. That's all he's got. And if he's having conversations with other people in the jail, they may be making recommendations or saying, "You do this and do that." But also, just from the defense attorney standpoint, even without having a client that maybe not, I'm not connected to this case at all. I don't know the people involved. I haven't talked to anybody involved, so I don't know. But even um, if the defense attorneys don't have a client who is constantly bombarding them and asking them for to do this or to do that, which happens a lot. They're also dealing with a very intense case, and this I mean, his life is on the line. And so when the stakes are this high for this type of a case, then being the defense attorneys, have to pull out all the stops. They have to file all the motions. They have to do all the things to cover themselves so that it doesn't like they haven't done anything as attorneys. There's this thing called ineffective assistance of counsel. They wanna be sure that they being the defense attorneys, that they don't somehow, um, make it appear or have it appear that they have not done everything they can do to represent this man effectively and give him an effective representation. It doesn't matter how reprehensible we think someone's crime is or was, they still deserve effective representation in court. That's what our Constitution guarantees. And so his attorneys are doing everything they can to effectively represent him. Part of that will be if he is saying, "I want you to do this," or "I want you to do that," if it's within reason. I mean, there have been some crazy requests out there by defendants, by clients, but if it's within reason, they have to file it because if they don't, he can claim later on that they did not effectively represent him. So, and I don't know that that's what's happened here, but just recently there has been a filing to have his guns returned. So, to back up a little bit, when he was arrested, they executed a search warrant at his home and at where he worked, where his office was. They confiscated within that search something like 280 firearms. 280. That's a lot of firearms. If you have ever shopped for firearms, you know how expensive they are. And when you have 280 of them, that adds up in value. And so that could certainly turn into a very valuable collection if those are returned to the family. So Heuermann has asked through his counsel to have those guns returned. Whenever things are seized during a search warrant, as was the case here, these guns were seized during a search warrant, as was other potential pieces of evidence. Those things, like the guns, if used in commission of an offense, number one, will stay in evidence until the trial is over. And then, because it has to be available for the jury to see and touch if they want to touch it, whatever. But after the trial is over, those things can be condemned and turned over to the state or destroyed. So, what Heuermann is trying to say is wait a minute, these guns were not used in the offense. They belong to my family. They should go back to my family. And a family should be allowed to sell those guns and use those proceeds for my defense and or for family things, so family finances. So he is trying to get those guns back. What the prosecution has to do is say, well, one, we believe that the weapons may have been used in the commission of one or more of these offenses. If they can convince the judge that some of these weapons or all of the weapons were used in the commission of these offenses, or that judge, we're still trying to figure all that out. So don't turn the guns over just yet because we're still investigating because there's still bodies that he hasn't been charged with. So they may be able to tell the judge, Judge, we're still investigating. We don't want to turn these over just yet. We got to get this investigation over with first. And then, we'll entertain this idea of turning them back over if they have not been used in the commission of an offense. Anything that's been used in the commission of a crime or an offense can be condemned and forfeited. So that's what is probably going to happen if any of the guns have been used in the commission of an offense. So the defense is just trying to say they are not part of this case, turn them back over so the family can sell them and then do whatever they want to with the money. Interesting perspective from the victim's family standpoint is I don't know, but they could certainly file a lawsuit and try to get any funds that he may get from the sale of those firearms. So, if they could get a judgment against him, any money that he makes, whether through the sale of property or through any book rights, movie rights, whatever down the road, they may be able to take and kind of get that money from him rather than it going to his family. So there are some options there for the family as far as the firearms. But that is what's happening in court. I heard some people on a news channel speculating that because I think there's some other hearings. So between now and the time he goes to trial, the defense attorneys and the prosecution, but really the defense attorneys are going to file a lot of motions. And if you're not familiar with a motion, it is just a document that gets filed with the court asking the court to do something. Asking, asking the court, please do this thing. In this situation, it's judge, please return those guns. It may be, there may be, and there will be in the future, motion to suppress. We're asking you to suppress evidence. So it's something that's where a motion is just asking the court to do something, make a movement towards some type of order. And so between the time of now and when they go to trial, there's going to be a lot of motions filed. So this will be in and out of court for the months and months before he goes to trial. I heard some of the pundits on TV earlier today talking about how he probably will not be in court. I would find that hard to believe with the stakes as high in this case. Defendants are generally allowed to be in the court because, again, the judge and the defense attorneys have to protect his rights. And if they don't take all the steps and allow all the things, allow him to be there, or at least participate via Zoom or some type of closed circuit television where he can watch and hear what's happening in real time, then that could be considered some type of violation of his rights. And so, because he has a right to be in the courtroom, he has a right to be there and be present. And so they have to be on the court, the attorneys have to be very mindful of ensuring his rights are protected at every step of the way so that if he gets convicted down the line, down the road, that it doesn't come back on some little technicality like he wasn't able to be present and be part of his defense. So he has to be able to be part of his defense. So that is the kind of what's happening right now. I expect there will be a lot more motions. There'll be a lot more things, just minor things for a lot of reasons. And the defense is going to file some motions that they know will get denied, that they just have to file them. So they just have to ask these things. And that's just a way to protect them from any type of accusation of not being an effective counsel, but also to ensure that their clients' rights are protected. No matter what you think of the client, they have to represent him effectively. All right, so that's enough about him. Let me take a sip. Now, what I really want to talk about, and it's not a what, but a who, and that is the women. So his victims, I've mentioned their names already, but I just want to say it again because I want you to remember their names and not his. So we have Shannon Gilbert. Well, the ones he is charged with is Maureen Brainerd Barnes. She was 25 years of age when she went missing. Melissa Bartholomew. She was 24 years of age when she went missing in July 2009. Megan Waterman. She went missing in June of 2010. She was the mother of a 3-year-old, and Maureen was the mother of 2 children. Amber Costello went missing in September 2010. And then I mentioned Shannon Gilbert. So she went missing in May of 2010. Each one of these young women were sex workers. That's what we've heard them referred to as. They're escorts, sex workers, prostitutes. There are a lot of names that people have given to these women over the years. They sometimes say that prostitution is the oldest profession. There was a DOJ report on trafficking in victims from, I think, 2010, and the writer of that report said that yes, it may be the oldest profession, but it's actually the oldest form of oppression. And I just want to touch base on these victims. So I mentioned that a few of them had children. I've worked a lot with sex trafficking victims. I've worked a lot with women who were sex workers, prostitutes, dancers, and the ones that I've worked with, and I can't speak for every single one out there, every single woman out there who is a sex worker, but the ones I have worked with, and it's quite a few, would not have been doing that had they been whole financially, spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally. This was not a choice profession for them, particularly those with children. The ones that I met, particularly like in the dance clubs, the strip clubs, they were doing that to provide for the kids. I had one woman that was a prostitute, and she told me, Miss Tanya, if you can get me a job where I can make enough money to support my children and my sister's children, who she was also raising, I wouldn't have to do this. But she was already working at a gas station. She was already getting government assistance, and it wasn't enough to support all the children that she had to support and support herself. So, and I'm not saying she had like 10 kids either. I mean, but just the cost of raising children. I mean, think about how much it costs to raise a child. Think of the food cost. Think of the electricity, the water, the internet, and then add school supplies, school field trips, all the things that parents you have to do as a parent and you have to pay for. Think about those things. I had a secretary at one point who had 3 kids in school, and she was a single mom, and they had their May Day, field day, or whatever. And each one of those kids had to buy a t-shirt and had to pay for some expenses for the May Day, for the field day. That was like $20 or $30 per child. When you got 3, that's $90 right there, or $60, however much it was, right there, right out of pocket. And for parents who are already struggling, that's a lot. So these women, I bring that up because I want you to see these women, as young women, not as prostitutes, not as an object. When I read about the chief of police who was frequenting sex workers at the time that they should have been thoroughly investigating these murders, I can't help but to think that he didn't take it seriously because he viewed sex workers as objects, as property. And when you do that, when you dehumanize someone and you remove that humanity from them and you label them as, oh, she's a prostitute, oh, she's a streetwalker, or, one of the things I heard over and over, she's a crack whore, or she is all these things. Some of the words I don't even want to mention because they're just so derogatory. But when you think of someone in that way and you only use and abuse their body for your purposes and you treat them as property, you are dehumanizing them. You don't value their lives. And so you're not going to try and protect them. But what I hope that you will do is that you will see them, that you will, you know, as they are literally crying from the grave, from their burial site, see me, see this monster who did this to me, that you will start seeing them as the young women who they were, not the brokenness that they were a part of, but the young women, the young moms, the ones who were doing these things, working these types of jobs to support their children. Um, I think one of them, it was mentioned she had a drug habit, and that happens too. Sometimes women got into sex work to support a drug habit. Most of the women I talked to and worked with, they developed a drug habit after being in the sex work. And a lot of the women I worked with got involved with prostitution when they were 13 years old, 14 years old, because they ran away from home and they got groomed into the life. And so um, these women deserve to be remembered as young women, as mothers, and as people just trying to, women just trying to earn a living, women just trying to survive. And I hope that does not get lost in all the motions and the pleadings and everything that's going to happen over the next several months. I just hope that you will take a step back and remember who they were and acknowledge their value, acknowledge their presence, and acknowledge that their time on earth was valuable. It's disturbing how he just discarded them. He wrapped them in this burlap wrap that he used for hunting and just discarded them like they were trash. These women were not trash. No matter what you think about someone who um, is being prostituted, they're not trash. They shouldn't be treated as trash, and he just discarded their bodies as if they were trash. Having worked with so many women, I know that these scenarios scare them. Um, they realize that this can happen to them at any moment. The next John that calls them could be the one that kills them or could be the one that beats them up. I would ask that as you are invested in this case, if you're listening and paying attention to the Gilgo Beach murders and you are fascinated by the true crime element of it, that you won't forget the true human element. So, yes, this is a true crime, but there's a true human, there's a face behind that crime. And these women were, many of them were reported missing. And I just want to touch base a moment on missing kids. Missing kids often become trafficked kids. And we don't hear much about missing kids uh, in the news because a lot of them are runaways. A lot of them we we're not going to hear about on the news because they may come from a poor background. They may not have the family support that's really out there fighting to get their name and pictures on the news. So I would ask that you pay attention when someone in your circle goes missing or a child or you see something come across because missing kids become trafficked kids. And a lot of these kids will end up um, you know, they say the lifespan of someone working on the street, someone being prostituted is 7 years. It's just a rough life. And so when you hear of a missing person, not everyone is going to have the same fate as these young women, but some of them will. And if you do nothing other than just pray for that safety of that person that's missing, or pray for that family, um, because I mean, can you imagine not knowing, going to bed at night, not knowing where your child is laying her head? If she's cold, if she's hot, if it's, you don't know anything about what's happening. And so we get caught up in these true crime cases like this, and we're fascinated by it, but never forget the true human element behind it, and never forget, there's it start like in this case, it started as missing people. These women were missing, and someone did not treat them with the human dignity that they deserved. Someone did not treat them with the humanity and the value that they deserved. And they are now gone. Their kids are now without moms. So keep that in mind as you continue to follow this story and continue to um, be fascinated by the true crime element. So remember the names: Maureen, Melissa, Megan, Amber, and Shannon. Y'all have a good night.